experience on your CV.
That's a really good idea, Tess. I didn't even think about that. So if you want to do something that can kind of better the lab, which will make them more likely to be interested in that, especially since there are so many like visual abstracts, and because the academia is catching up that the internet's a thing. And so having like department websites, that kind of stuff, if you can do something that's like on behalf of your lab, even if you're really not that interested in it, just to get your foot in the door and say like, hey, I made this thing, now I'm going to make this next thing, is also something you could probably try. What else we got? What else we got?
So I did a quick look around. It seems I'm the old guy. So
well, Joe was here for a while, so but you're right now you are.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm wondering, the last two people who spoke seemed to talk about trying to get their PI to buy into scicomm. And I guess I'm wondering how much of a problem is that? Because it shouldn't be, in my view.
Yeah, so you guys go ahead and you can jump in and say if you had a problem with it. Mike, I can tell you from, Joe and I have been to like 35 different research institutions in the last 2 years, traveling with Joe's Big Idea, obviously, some of them being yours. And I've never gone to an institution that didn't have at least one person who says, I'm not getting the support that I need, or I'm being actively dissuaded from that. So I think it is a huge problem, and I'm interested what you guys think. And again, you can just unmute yourself and start talking, and if too many people are talking at once, I'll mute you because I'm the boss of this conversation. So you guys tell Mike what's up.
Well, I think it depends on the advisor. Like I said, I had 2 very different experiences as a graduate student and as a postdoc. So as a grad student, my advisor was open to things that I did and encouraged me to try new things, as long as they were, not outside of the scope of what would benefit me in the lab. So he didn't want me running around doing crazy stuff. Also, I had a hard time keeping focused. As a grad student, I wanted to do all the things. So he was very intentional about, what he encouraged me to do or dissuaded me from doing. For my postdoc, my advisor was definitely anything that was not lab related was not done on lab time. And if I was interested in something that was outside of my lab work, then I had to use my personal time, and it was very discouraged for me to take those activities on.
Who else? Wow, just a bunch of chatty Cathys. This is a science communication group, guys. Emphasis on the communication part, mostly. Who's going to talk? Sarah Loftus, you're silent.
I have a question.
Sure.
I put it in the chat, but I guess no one's reading the chat.
I'm reading it.
I just so how do you avoid seeming like you're just doing PR stuff? Because there's doing PR, and then there's, if you want to get into science journalism, or if you want to be seen as a authoritative voice on a subject, just doing PR for your lab is it's science communication, but how do you make sure that if you are doing more PR stuff that it's balanced, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah.
Makes sense. There's other things out there.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think what we were talking about for the science video for the lab thing is kind of if you have an advisor that's really hesitant to let you do anything outside, that's a good way to get your advisor engaged in science communication and kind of see hey, this can be a benefit to the lab. That's kind of where that came from. But obviously, that is kind of more PR for your lab. And so it's more of a good way to get your advisor on board with that kind of stuff. And then hopefully you'd be able to do things that are more journalism. And Mike, it's not even necessarily that people are saying you can't do this, but in my case, my advisor was sure, you can do that as long as absolutely nothing changes and you never take time out of the lab when you should be in the lab, which is really ineffective if, say, you want to be at a museum that only has an event on a Wednesday. So I think a lot more often it's more that it's definitely not encouraged, and it's subtly like, yeah, sure, go ahead and do that, but just change nothing about what you're doing. So I think a lot of students have a hard time getting advisors to say like, yes, this is important for the lab, this is important for society. So if you need to take a Wednesday off every month to do something, then that's, you know, the best way to go about it. So I would say it's more like that, I think, more frequently, but you guys can tell me if I'm wrong.
I had, oh, Nick.
I was just gonna, but okay. I just wanted to like also talk about what Maria was saying, because I would argue that, you know, especially when you get started, you need to talk about what you know more, and I think working on your own work and your lab's work first and making sure that you can communicate that is a great way to do it, and then eventually you move on to other things. But I don't see any problems like kind of falling into that PR for your work or your lab works, and I think that's a win-win situation, especially as you're starting. And then yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to say, or at least that's what my experience.
Derek, did you want to say what you wanted to say?
I'm going to say that I wanted to say something. So no, I was going to ask if anybody had actually felt repercussions from their advisor for just doing these things. Because I know there's a sense that maybe we shouldn't, or there's even active language dissuading us from participating in things. Has anybody actually experienced like, you know, day-to-day repercussions of these choices in a negative way or in a positive way? Or I guess that's, instead of talking about abstract ideas of what PIs think or what they do think or what they don't think or what they do want, I would be interested to know the actual effects.
When I was in my postdoc, again, this was the advisor that was not fond of science communication. There were a few instances where my advisor insinuated or accused me of not putting in a full 40-hour work week in the lab. Luckily, for the previous year, I had logged all of my hours for every day, so that if something like that came up, I would have had evidence that I was working. And I was working well over 40 hours a week. So yeah, there were definitely, if I had not had that, I don't think that they would have necessarily like tried to get me in trouble or anything, but I did have to protect myself because they were not supportive of my other activities.
That was the same for me. It would just be like, hey, I've noticed that you're unfocused in lab and you need to be spending more time here. That was kind of what I got. And, you know, when you're a very driven student, which we all are, that was repercussion enough for me to shy away from doing some of that stuff for a while before I was like, hey, wait a minute. Like, I know I'm doing as much work, and I'm certainly doing enough work that I'm getting paid for. But, you know, having a person that is, one, in charge of your future, and two, that you look up to, say, like, you're not working hard enough and I need to see you more in the lab, it was tough for me. I'm comfortable saying that.
Gosh, I'm finding this pretty disheartening about how many folks there might be out there who actively dissuade from participating in these things that are professional development for students, one, good for society, two, three, good for the lab. And I do get as a PI, I get it. You know, we have pressures and we want to see work move forward. Everybody does, right? Students do too. So I'm not sure what to say, except I'm surprised. And I think it would be, I know you're probably not in a position to do this, but I think it's kind of one of those things that's probably hard for a PI to defend, not wanting you to develop yourself. So I guess I'd like make it akin to it's hard to be a racist outwardly. You know, it's hard to be against this kind of stuff outwardly. So you might think about if there's an advocate that you have, someone on your committee or someone that you're interacting with on your science communication who can sort of, maybe not so overtly, but sort of call out your advisor and say, hey, you know, these are good things for students, or support you in some way. I just think I know that happens. I know there are people. I think they're quiet about it though, or at least they let the students know. But as far as outwardly to colleagues, I think it'd be hard for them to say, no, I'm not going to let my students do any of this cool stuff that's good for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mike, especially if you do have people dedicated to professional development at your university. And like Mike said, I had basically what ended up happening is I had multiple, when I was teaching the science communication course in Rochester, there were so many PIs coming up to my PI saying like, Maddie's course really helped my student and they're doing so much better that she couldn't ignore the value of it for the university. And then, you know, you can throw your professional development in there. In my case, my advisor's stance was, it's my job to develop you as a scientist. And so that was kind of the struggle that I had, which is like, my mindset was, you're my mentor and you should be helping me get to the next stage in my career, regardless of whether or not that's in science or going to NPR. And her stance was, I believe in you. I think you're going to do a great job, but that's not my position and not my profession. You know, like that's not what I'm here for. I'm going to develop you as a scientist and that's all I'm going to do. So that was kind of like my experience. And we have somebody in the chat saying, hey, my advisor gave me money to do a science writing course. So there are some good ones. We're not saying there aren't.
I don't know if other people, hello? Okay. I don't know if other people have had this problem, but paid work when you're a student is kind of really frowned upon. And I haven't gotten major repercussions for it, but I've definitely gotten comments like, you have paid work outside of being a student. Like that's actually breaking rules and stuff like that. So I didn't know if anyone else encountered that.
That's a good question. I'd be interested in what you guys have found.
I've deliberately not looked at the rules because I suspect that I'm breaking them if I do.
Yeah, that's how the law works. All right, what else? Anybody else?
Question: would like being paid as a freelance writer count as paid work under those contracts? I'm just curious for career planning when I'm a grad student.
Yeah, I would be interested in the person who brought this up. Is that the case in your lab?
I mean, I got away with doing it, but I'm not doing freelance writing right now. So I don't know, but I know that I feel like there's ways around the rule.
I think there is too. And this is something that I can look into for you guys. I mean, it's going to be pretty much institution by institution basis, but I want to say like if you're an NIH funded person, there's a rule in there. I mean, I don't know, Mike, do you know about this?
I'll probably get everybody in trouble, but my piece of advice about academia and rules is it's a lot easier to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, rather than asking permission to do things. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is being recorded, so don't worry, I'll redact that section.
No, but I'm not certain. I think NSF rules, as long as things are for your education, I think that you can work that in. I think lots of places have, for at least graduate students anyway, rules against having an outside job. I guess I would depend on what you're doing and what you're getting paid, and I suppose how much it is, whether it can be considered consulting, and then you might have to think about conflicts of interest rules at your universities and those kind of forms that you have to fill out every year about what your activities are. So it's kind of nebulous, but so I guess I agree with Matt. You need to look into it if you're doing a lot of those things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not doing many of them, you might be able to get away with the Derek Crow route. I know a lot of people that worked in graduate school and not a lot of people that got in trouble with it, but it was not something that they broadcasted. So, I mean, I can try to look into it for you guys, but I think the idea is it's better just to do it. and
see, yeah, right.
I mean, I know that sounds terrible, but I don't know. I mean, freelancing for a couple of pieces a year, I can't imagine that that's going to result in a huge consequence, but I'm not sure. Somebody else in the chat said that somebody had gotten in trouble for doing that, so I'm kind of interested in what they have to say.
So I was on a postdoc, an NIH postdoctoral fellowship, and that was one of the points that my advisor said, well, your 100% time should be dedicated to working on this grant. But when I talked to my program officer at NIH, they were like, of course, some percentage of your time should be used on professional development. So, you know, we don't expect 100% of your time to be working in the lab on this grant. There are other things, you know, you have to write manuscripts, you have to write other grants, you have to get the professional development skills that you need to have a career. So I feel like, you know, you can kind of use these grants, I think, sometimes to strong arm your students and your postdocs. But when you actually talk to the people giving you the money, of course, they want you to spend some time on professional development.
Yeah, that might be the way to go, is say like, hey, I'm writing, it's helping me be a better communicator. This is professional development. That would be the route that I would take. Does anybody else want to say to this before I go to more about this before I go to the chat questions?
Oh, I'll just say that I am a student blogger for my university, and I do get paid for that. And I was on an NSF fellowship at the time, and I got emailed like my third year into blogging, and they asked, oh, like, we didn't know this was happening because I guess it is technically against the rules, but they just asked me if it was interfering in my research, and I said no, and so they were fine with it.
Like, it's only a problem if it's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you, Sarah. Anybody else have anything on this? I'm going to count down. No, I didn't. All right. Okay. So McKenna asked, you know, is this a part of the academia trap? And I think, you know, it might be, I would say yes. And the academia trap, I assume you're talking about is you need data to publish, you need to publish in order to get grants, you need grants in order to be able to fund your science. So, you know, PIs feel this pressure to get as much data from you as possible, and they kind of ignore you as humans because there is the other side of it that, hey, if we don't get this grant, I'm not going to be able to pay for you, and I'm not going to be able to pay for other people, and I'm not going to be able to train scientists. So I think the pressure from a lot of PIs is understandable ? In some ways. And I think it probably does have to deal with, you know, the competition to get grants, and the more data they get from you, the more that they can like provide for your lab family. What do you guys think? And also, McKenna, tell me if that's what you meant by academic trap, or I just made up a term. Oh boy, it's just Palka bumping in. You know your sound's on, Palka. I'm gonna beat him up. What do we got? Anybody else? All right, so
I would just say I think you were right, exactly right. That's what there is that pressure, and that's what I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah. And I mean, it also might be, you know, my advisor was really old school in the way that every graduate student she had went through graduate school, went to Harvard, did their postdoc at Harvard. And I think, you know, in the way that she was almost like, it was hard for her, you know, one time she told me, she was like, you know, if you like, you're really lucky because back in my day, if you didn't go into academia, you were seen to be a failure. And I was like, kind of feels like you just told me I'm a failure in a weird way right there. So I think it's partially like the academic pressure, and partially some are like old school academics, which is like, we're scientists and we're here to make more scientists. And so I'm wondering if that's part of the problem on top of the competition problem. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing about what you just said was you said we're scientists, we're here to make more scientists. But I feel like, wouldn't it be great if there were more scientists who weren't just in a lab all the time? Like, why isn't that more a part of the conversation that happens? Like, why isn't there more encouragement for people who go get these in-depth degrees in science to go do other things? Because there's like very few academic jobs.
Joe, do you have anything to contribute? All right, I'm going to unmute you if you remain.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Actually, this goes to a discussion. Whoops. Watch out. I had a discussion, as a gentle word for it, with the dean of the Johns Hopkins Medical School Research Program. And she was at great pains to tell me how supportive they were, and how no, graduate students love us here because we know they're not all going to go on in academic science, and we prepare them with a once-a-month lecture about how to do something. And I mean, and then it was at a party, and there were some people she dragged over and said, "Here, you guys are graduate students, tell him." And I'm thinking, okay, sure. Your dean calls you over and says, "Tell this reporter that everything is fine at Johns Hopkins. What are you going to say?" I still think there's a tremendous disconnect. I think that a lot of the people at the top levels of schools think they're doing the right thing and have the idea that they want to do the right thing, but I don't think it's in their blood yet to think differently. That's my observation. And so how do we change that? Well, I think that the answer is, in part, we just, people keep trying to do things and coming back and start, getting recognition for what they've done and awards. And I'm trying to arrange things so that we can get more awards for scientists and grad students who do things outside of research. But I think the other thing is you got to get people to remind the dean and remind the president that you guys have committed to this. Now put up or shut up. And sometimes it means looping the PI and going straight to the dean. I don't know, maybe that's scarier than I imagine, but I think that these guys have got to be called to account for these promises that they've made. There, I'll shut up now.
All right, guys. Again, just try not to scream over top of each other, okay? This is a group discussion.
Sorry, I'm going to ask another question.
Come on in.
Start going.
Also, can you identify yourself? We see M. Marriott, and that's
Sorry. I am at work, so I keep.
Oh, you don't have to put. I just tell me your name.
Oh, it's Miley.
Hey, Miley, what's up? Ask us another question, and don't get in trouble.
Okay. No, I won't get in trouble. I just have to say I'm talking to Joe Palca at NPR, and I'm good.
Okay. Well, I think what you meant by that was Maddie Sofia at NPR, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking to Maddie too, who's awesome.
I think we know what she meant.
Anyway, so my question is, like, when you guys talk about, when you talk to your PIs, how do you talk about why you want to do this? Like, what's your motivation behind it? Because I feel like that is a key part of getting support, is why we want to do this in the first place. So I'm just curious to hear what the motivations are from everyone. Everyone can answer this question, why they want to go into science communication.
Derek Crow, why don't you get us started?
Okay. It hasn't been a choice as much as it's been just a series of opportunities that I decide to keep engaging in. Or like something will happen and I'll say, oh, that seems fun and that's interesting, and here I am. So I don't remember at what point I was like, oh, this is a thing that I want to do. There were just places where I could say, oh, I was involved in visual communication before graduate school, and then started noticing that scientists have no visual training at all, and seeing an opportunity to participate in that conversation. And then that's my story.
So when Hucky asks you why you want to do a thing, when Hucky asks you why you want to be in You Are Drinkers and Thinkers, what do you say to him?
We don't have those conversations. We just don't. That's not our relationship. Our PI relationship or our mentor relationship is like like we spend our time talking about the science that I'm doing. And sometimes there'll be weeks where he's like, you haven't done shit. And then I kind of just say, okay, and then feel like a terrible human being for a while, and then try to do more stuff. And then hopefully that doesn't happen the next week. So it's just this like constant ebb and flow of like, oh, there's a little bit more work to do this week on this stuff. And the next week I'll spend less time because I'm doing other stuff in the lab, or like, I'll just see opportunities to sort of fill my time. If something is running, then I can like go quick, do something in the communication realm. And I don't know how to do this. I'm with you guys. I just don't have the conversation with Huggy is the answer. It's like, I kind of gauge whether or not I'm spending too much time based on if he thinks that I'm moving forward fast enough with the work that I'm doing. And that's sort of my like metric.
Is there somebody that's had that conversation and you've had that and it's gone well, and the reasons that you gave for wanting to do it were understood? Does anybody have that kind of, because there are people that have a good relationship with their PI and their PI is into science communication in this group. I know that. So what were the reasons you gave for why you want to do the thing you were doing, and was that well accepted?
So I guess I can answer my own question because I have an experience with this. So I'm still an undergrad, but I'm doing research at my university, and I do a lot of outreach on campus with the Society of Physics students. And then like over the summer, I told my PI, I remember the conversation telling my PI that I wanted to do a journalism internship over the summer. And it's not a scientific based paper, it's just a local paper, but I told her and she was like, oh, why? Like not in a bad way. She was really supportive. I told her about wanting to do science journalism, go into science communications, and I don't have time to take journalism classes, so I have to learn the ropes somehow. So the internship was the opportunity. And she was really supportive, but I didn't get into huge detail about how that career, basically I told her I'm deciding on careers, I guess, like, because there is that pressure, oh, why aren't you going to go into academia? Because it's not that I don't want to go to grad school. I do. But I also I feel like I have 2 feet on either side of this all the time. So, but I didn't necessarily talk about the other side as much. I don't know. It was an interesting conversation where I felt like I was hedging a lot and also just trying to but she was really supportive. She didn't need me to go into a lot of detail. But yeah, I feel like it is hard to talk about it sometimes, especially when you feel like there's that expectation of, okay, well, what are you going to keep doing for me? And she was sad to lose me for the summer, but I told her I'd come back in the fall, so she was satisfied.
Yeah, I can tell you guys what I used to tell my PI, and that's, that I feel a responsibility to the people that are paying for our science, for them to understand it. I told them that I think that our community, I used to live in Rochester, that our community has almost no way to engage with the research that's going on. And I thought, we're so excited about everything we're doing. And I think that, this is really important that our community gets engaged with the researchers that are living in it. And this is just a good way to give back to the community. I told her that it was really fun and I enjoyed it. And it was what I wanted to do with my life. So it was professional development for me. And, basically some of those things went over really well. Some of those things did not go over really well. Like, this is fun for me didn't go over that great. But the idea behind, all of these scientists want people in the community to support science and to understand what science is about. So if you can try to make that understood, that's why you're doing it. There's something in there, deep down in there, that they are supportive of, because they are scientists and their well-being depends on the American public thinking that what they're doing is important. And so those are some of the ways that I tried to basically, validate what I was doing and why I was doing it. And some of them worked better than others. And it's going to be completely dependent on you and your advisor and that kind of stuff.
Well, and I think another way you could also kind of start this conversation, and it builds a little on what Joe said about how these institutions are saying that they support these things, but what are they actually doing to support students when they choose to engage in these activities? And I think that, with the individual development plan offered by AAAS, you can do that. It can show you some areas where your strengths are. There's lots of other self-assessment tools that you can engage in, like Strengths Finder, I found to be very helpful. It's something that we're trying to encourage our students here to do, because so often, especially as a graduate student and as a postdoc, you are so focused outward on all the things that you need to do, all the data you need to generate. And very rarely do you get to kind of turn the camera back in on yourself. Why do I want to do this? Well, it plays to my strengths. I know that I'm good at communication. I know that I'm good working with people. These are the areas that I want to go into. I've taken these self-assessment tools. And, if your advisor really does buy into these, now the NSF is starting to require that you fill out your IDP every month and you update it. So, that's another pretty strong way, although I do like your pitch, Maddie, which is, this is fun. But if you use these self-assessment tools, you can use those as support to engage in some of these other activities.
I just wonder what people say when maybe you don't have like your professional science communication job lined out, and you maybe are kind of always thinking you're going to do this on the side, because I feel like a lot of pressure to just only do stuff that's really going to work me towards my career, and that no other time should be spent on things that are extracurricular.
Can I jump in there? So, kind of working on what people were saying, I mean, I guess my experience was a little different because it had to do with career development. So when I started talking more to an IPI who was very receptive to these things, it was more in the context of like, what do you want to do in the future, right? And then in that sense, you could be like, well, I want to do these skills so I can do this always, on the side. Or you could see, I was considering either academia or like policy, and then I said like communication is very important for folks, so then I should probably start working on these things. And from the PI's perspective, she did what the PI, you hope your PI does, she's being like, oh well, if this makes sense in your career, let me help you to like have some time for this. And then in exchange, I tried to make it as useful for her as I could. So just to say, like, those conversations sometimes go very well and have to do with how you want your career, even though you don't have it lined up and things might change afterwards. But my case might be the exception of when it went well. I think you hear both when like receptive or non-receptive PIs. Sometimes I feel like maybe we don't report enough the good experiences, but they do happen.
Does anybody have any more questions? So we've basically talked about, like, what do you say to your advisor when you want to do scicomm? We've talked about what do you do if you have an advisor that's not really supportive, which is, basically find an advocate that's, maybe not your advisor, but a committee member or somebody that somebody in the professional development office, or somebody who will vouch for the fact that the stuff is really important. What else have we talked about? We've talked a little bit about, I think, like how you balance that little work life, like the whole scicomm versus research when you don't, necessarily have a PI that supports you doing scicomm during research hours. What else? What else do you guys have? I'm interested in any of your other questions. I mean, there are a lot of you here, and so I'm sure that you're thinking things.
I had a question related to, I guess, the hours of when you spend on science communication. So for example, I feel personally guilty if I am working on a blog during typical business hours, but then if I try to work on it in snippets over weeknights, it just takes forever. And so I'm wondering kind of if you devote a whole day to scicomm and then devote research full-time to other days, or how do you balance that?
Guys, did you hear Sarah's question?
I would just say all of the above. It totally depends. Like some projects are like, I'm going to work only at night. I don't know how I decide either. It doesn't make any sense. Sometimes a day goes by and I'm like, well, I only did communication stuff today. And then other days, and that does make, I do feel guilty about that. I feel guilty about it every single time. But then I have conversations with my PI and he's like, oh, there are no lab working hours. So there's lab projects that I do at home and on the weekends too. So it just feels like a big mash that I'm constantly trying to figure out. And it doesn't make any sense linearly, or like, I don't know how to do that. I'm terrible at time management.
Who else? Does anybody do it like only in their off hours? Did somebody sneak it in during their work day? Somebody do it only on the weekends? What do you guys do? From the chat. Oh, yes, go ahead.
This is Nico again. I feel bad that I'm talking about much. But
It's okay,
for me, lately I've been trying to do it in off business hours. Any days, whatever. But then I think it's good to try to have like a structured life. So it's been more of a struggle for me to go from grad school life, which is completely non-structured, and you work all the time, everywhere, on everything. And sometimes you're productive, and sometimes you're not. But you're going to work 18 hours, so who cares, right? And so to like trying to have a more structured one. So I don't know. I have hopes. I don't know. I'll let you guys know if you work or not on trying to have a more compartmentalized like schedule. But it takes forever right now.
Yeah, and I just, as a public service announcement, want to remind everyone that they do not need to feel guilty for working on science communication stuff. I struggled with this all the time as a young, gay, Catholic woman. The guilt comes strong and it stays in there deep. And I had somebody who was actually Tess's advisor that basically said, F them. This is your life. This is, you are here to get stuff done and your lab depends on you, but this is your life. And if you want to work on science communication, especially for professional development, that's what you need to do. And you need to get comfortable with the fact that you're going to spend some time doing something that's not lab work, because guess what? You are probably already working, and this is what some people said in the chat, you're probably already working more than 40 hours a week. You don't need to feel guilty if 5 hours of your 65-hour work week is spent on science communication. I graduated graduate school with 4 papers, and my first author is still not published, and nobody at NPR has kicked me out yet. So if you are interested in leaving the lab, and I hope that not all of you are, because we really need scientists who stay and love communicating, this is not something to feel guilty about. Your advisor will occasionally make you feel that way, but remember that it's not like you're shooting up meth. You're doing work, you're writing pieces, you're creating outreach materials for the youths. This is not something to feel guilty about whatsoever. And as a person who is on the other side of that, that's really easy for me to say. But I have struggled with it a lot. And again, remember, this is professional development, and just because nobody values it around you doesn't mean that it's not valuable. So I just want to put it out there that to try to shake that guilt off of you as much as you can, because again, regardless of what happens, this is your life and it's your future. And if working on the office hours programs with Maddie, Sofia, and Joe Palca make it more likely that you get more bylines, so you get the internship that you want, so that you can get the job that you want afterwards, that is more important than your lab work. I said it. Send your PIs to me because I said it. So I just wanted to make that a public statement.
Yeah, I would second that too. There's a lot of guilt that goes on in the academic setting. I was strangled by it for a very long time. And it still is something that I struggle with now that I'm out. I'm more on the administrative side. I'm a project manager now. So it's something that I think is kind of seated within you, and you have to just consciously say, I understand that that's making me feel guilty, but this is good for me, like what Maddie said. It's going to, oftentimes these other opportunities are the things that lead you down a new path. It's not necessarily the experiment that you're going to do that day. It's this cool connection that you made that's opening up all these doors. So I would say be open to these opportunities, give yourself that time. And if you have to have a conversation with your PI about how much of your time now you can spend, I mean, I think at least 20% of your time should be spent on some form of professional development. That can be both scientific, so you get more technical expertise, or these broad skill sets, these other professional skills that will help you be competitive for your careers.
Anybody else who's out of, or who's not out, but who's no longer a graduate student that wants to talk to that? Because I don't think that that can be said really enough.
To the counterpoint, or a counterpoint, I can intellectualize these things and see that that is the case, and I can believe that that's true, but it's still difficult to like ultimately, like my PI is paying me, and I'm in that lab and I'm doing the work, and I am also interested in it. So there is this like constant back and forth that I struggle with that I don't know. I mean, and it's really helpful to hear you all say this so that I don't, like beat myself up constantly, which I do, but it's still, it's just a constant conversation until we're on one side or the other, or like there's just tension back and forth all the time. And I don't know. I think we should all just acknowledge that and help each other like in that tension and like sink into it and be uncomfortable with it, I guess, because I don't know how else to do it.
Does anybody else have some deep-seated guilt that they want to talk about on today's mentor chat and psychiatric evaluation? I'm a doctor, so it's fine. I have a lot of expertise. Anybody? Nobody? I can just stare at this camera. Honestly, I work in public radio. They have no idea where I am. I'm in a studio right now. Nobody can find me. All right, okay, all right. Well, I think that is, a good spot as far as we have 5 minutes left. Are there any other burning questions? If you're in the chat, I'm looking. Why doesn't someone else bring something up?
I know where you are. What do you mean nobody knows where
Jesus,
you are?
he's still on the chat. He's all right.
Exactly where you are.
Okay, get out. You're muted. You're out.
No, I'm not.
Muted.
Unmuted.
Damn it. Okay. Anyways, guys. So, Joe, do you have anything to tell these youths about not feeling guilty for doing science communication, understanding that they're going to feel it anyways?
No, I thought the discussion at the end there was very interesting, and I agree that there's something wrong, and really one of the things that I've been trying to do, as much as I'm trying to encourage people like you guys from the bottom up and saying, okay, graduate students, go get them, Tiger, is I have the ear of senior people in academia, and I'm really trying to pound on them on your behalf. We haven't talked about this yet, and I actually haven't read the report, but there's a new report from the National Academy of Sciences that talks about the importance of communication in graduate school education. Just came out 10 days ago. And I think we should all download that, find the section that says this is important, and stick it up on our doors. I don't have a door, I have a cubicle, but because I think, I really think, it's like, when I was coming out of graduate school, people were paying lip service. Oh, it's so important to be a good teacher, but we really mean we only care if you can do research and bring in money. I think that's still probably a problem, but I think this is that same kind of problem. They know it's important. I mean, you're in an educational institution. You're supposed to be getting an education, not working as a serf. And so I think there's some guilt to be brought to bear. And honestly, you know, when you guys start publishing in Scientific American or The Conversation, people are going to see that. I promise you. There's a night. What's Annie Wu? What's
Katie Wu?
Katie Wu. Katie Wu is going to have an article in Vox, and when that comes out, people are going to, ooh, look, we have a graduate student in Vox. Great, you know, it's going to make people stop and pay attention. So it's tough. I get it. I don't think if I were in your shoes, I would be any more successful at fending off the guilt and uncertainty. But that's what this project is about. Maddie and I are trying to underscore that we more than most people in journalism and more than most people in communication know what you're going through and want to do something to change it. And so that's why, I mean, we've gotten traction, and, you know, foundations are saying, hey, this is good. You know, we want to support Joe and Maddie, which in turn supports you. So let's make it happen.
Wow, Joe, that was really nice. I'm glad that you unmuted yourself for that.
No, you know, we fool around a lot, but I've been committed to this for a long time. I have radio producers who, you know, they laugh at me. They come to one or two of these, and I'm proud. I'm glad they do. But I do a lot of this, and because I think I believe in it that strongly. So anyway, and that's the failure part is, you know, so stupid. I mean, do not buy into this. You're a failure if you don't go on in academic science. That's a disastrous trap, and there's no reason for it.
Yeah. All right, guys, it is 3:00. That concludes our first mentor chat. I appreciate everybody coming. We are going to record this, so if you're like, wow, I just wish I could relive every moment, you can, except for that I got nervous and only recorded the last 45 of the 60 minutes. So honestly, the first 15 weren't our best anyways. So does anybody have any last minute things they want to say before we leave? Speak now. All right. It's been good, guys. I appreciate you all. Go out there and communicate.